Daniel Prude, Eric Garner, George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor. We all know these names. Unless you've been under a rock for the last couple of years, a number of African Americans have been killed by police officers who have received little to no punishment for what they've done. I believe it's time for a change. I believe that it's time for stricter laws to be put in place so that police officers can be held accountable for what they've done. Through these new laws, this will save a lot more lives and change the way that police officers approach people. If police officers were to prohibit a lot of actions, this would cause a lot less casualties. I was on the intercept.com and they mentioned prohibition against chokeholds. I believe this is a great law because it causes a lot less harm when trying to apprehend a culprit. If this was implemented in early 2020, George Floyd might still be here today. Another law that was mentioned on the intercept.com was prohibition against shooting at a moving vehicle. If this was implemented in early 2017, young 15-year-old Jordan Edwards might still be here today. But a police officer was shooting at a moving vehicle and took his life and received no charges. Prohibition is not the only way that we can implement these laws. We can also implement requirements that will cause police to use before they resort to using a gun. For example, on the intercept.com, they spoke on requiring a colleague to stop using excessive force. If this law was implemented in early 2020, George Floyd might still be here today. Another law that was talked about was requiring officers to use verbal warnings. Stephon Clark was 22 years old before he got shot 20 times by police officers because they thought he had a gun in his hand when it was simply just his phone. If they had just used a verbal warning and tried to talk him down to see if it was a gun or a phone, he might still be here today. Another law that was mentioned on the intercept.com was a requirement to exhaust all other forces until deadly force is needed. If this was used, Tamir Rice might still be here today. Tamir Rice was 12 years old and he was shot and killed just because he had a toy gun in his hand as soon as police arrived on the scene. If they had just used other means of communication, Tamir might still be here today. With these laws, we can finally hold officers accountable. Too many officers have gone unaccountable for what they've done. Former officer Darren Wilson, had killed 18-year-old Michael Brown and faced no charges. Although they got into a skirmish, Darren had resorted to using a gun. He could have used any other means of action. He could have used a taser, he could have used pepper spray, he could have used his baton, but he resorted to using his gun and Michael died. If the law of using alternative forces until deadly force is needed, Michael might still be alive today. Former officer Blaine Solomon and Officer Huey Lakes II encountered Alton Sterling, who was selling DVDs and CDs on the street. In footage, Solomon is heard threatening to shoot Alton in the head and then proceeds to shoot him 6 times. And on video, you can hear him calling him a stupid motherfucker repetitively. If the officer Howie Lakes had known about the law to stop a colleague from using excessive force, Alton Sterling might still be here today. It's time to hold people accountable for what they've done. If we prohibit and require these officers to use these